I've been an overnight security guard for 13 years. Last shift, I saw footage that made me walk out permanently. I was 30 seconds into reviewing the archived footage from camera 8B when I saw Dr. Elliot Chambers, the hospital's chief of surgery, the man who'd smiled at me every night for 8 years, inject something into a sedated patient's IV line, wait exactly 90 seconds while checking his watch, then calmly walk out of the recovery room. The patient's monitor flatlined 4 minutes later. The timestamp read 3:18 a.m., October 8th, 6 weeks ago. I sat in the security office of Riverside Medical Center with my coffee growing cold, watching a respected surgeon commit what looked like murder, and my hands started shaking so badly I had to set down my mug before I dropped it. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate, calculated, and recorded, and I had no idea what to do with what I'd just seen. My name is Tom Harrington, and I'd been working overnight security at Riverside Medical Center since 2011. It was a good job, stable, decent pay, health benefits. I monitored 42 cameras, did rounds every 2 hours, checked badges, kept the place safe. Nothing exciting ever happened. Medical emergencies, sure, but that was the doctor's problem. My job was simple. Watch the monitors, walk the halls, go home at 6 a.m. I'd seen the same faces for years. Dr. Chambers was one of the good ones, or so I thought. Always friendly, always remembered my name. "How's the family, Tom?" he'd ask when passing the security desk. I'd tell him about my daughter's soccer games or my son's college applications. Normal conversations, human moments. This man had seemed genuinely kind. I'd pulled the archived footage because of a request from the hospital's risk management department. They wanted recordings from the recovery wing for the past 8 weeks. Something about a patient complaint, a lawsuit maybe. Standard procedure. I was supposed to copy the files to a hard drive and deliver it to their office in the morning. But I'd made a mistake. I'd actually watched some of it. We weren't supposed to watch unless there was an incident report. Just copy and deliver. But it was 2:30 a.m. I was bored, and I'd gotten curious about what kind of complaint would require 2 months of footage. So I'd started scrubbing through the recordings at 4 times speed, looking for anything unusual. And I'd found it. I rewound the footage, watched it again. Dr. Chambers entering the recovery room at 3:18 a.m. The patient was already sedated, recovering from surgery earlier that evening. The chart at the foot of the bed identified her as patient 4429. No names on the monitors, just numbers for privacy. Dr. Chambers checked the hallway, making sure no nurses were nearby. Then he pulled a small syringe from his coat pocket, already prepared, and injected it into the IV line. He didn't hesitate. His movements were practiced, efficient. He stood there, watching the monitor, checking his watch. At 3:19 and 30 seconds, he left the room. At 3:22, alarms started going off. At 3:23, nurses rushed in. At 3:24, the resuscitation team arrived. At 3:26, they called time of death. I felt cold. This couldn't be real. Dr. Chambers was the chief of surgery. He saved lives. He'd performed thousands of successful operations. Why would he kill a patient? I checked the patient number against the hospital's database, something I technically wasn't supposed to have access to, but after 13 years, you learn the systems. Patient 4429, Margaret Lawson, age 68, admitted for routine gallbladder surgery. Surgery completed successfully at 6 p.m. on October 7th. Died at 3:26 a.m. on October 8th from complications during recovery. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest, unexpected but not uncommon in elderly patients post-surgery. Her family had accepted the explanation. No autopsy requested. Case closed. Except it wasn't complications. It was murder. I sat back in my chair trying to process this. Should I tell someone? Who? My supervisor? Hospital administration? The police? But what if I was wrong? What if there was a medical explanation I didn't understand? What if Dr. Chambers had been administering some emergency medication and I was misinterpreting what I'd seen? I pulled up the patient's medical records. Again, technically against protocol, but I needed to understand. The records showed no orders for any medication at 3:18 a.m. No emergency treatments authorized. Nothing that would explain what I'd witnessed. Dr. Chambers hadn't been there officially. He'd just walked in, injected something, and walked out. I checked the other cameras from that night. Camera 12A covered the nursing station. At 3:18 a.m., both nurses were at the far end of the hall, attending to another patient. Camera 6C covered the medication room. Dr. Chambers hadn't gone there. He'd brought the syringe with him. Camera 3D covered the hallway outside the recovery room. It showed Dr. Chambers approaching at 3:17, entering at 3:18, leaving at 3:19. No one else around. Completely alone. This was planned. Premeditated. I felt my stomach turn. I'd worked here for 13 years. I'd trusted these people. I'd believed in this hospital. And now I was watching evidence of murder on my security monitors, and everything I thought I knew was falling apart. I did what anyone would do. I kept watching. I went back through the archived footage, week by week, looking for similar incidents. It took me 3 hours. I found 4 more. September 12th, 2:45 a.m. Dr. Chambers injecting something into patient 3867, a 72-year-old man recovering from hip replacement surgery. Patient died at 3:12 a.m. from unexpected complications. September 28th, 1:33 a.m. Patient 4091, a 65-year-old woman after cardiac surgery. Died at 2:04 a.m. from heart failure. August 19th, 4:06 a.m. Patient 3354, a 70-year-old man after hernia repair. Died at 4:38 a.m. from pulmonary embolism. July 31st, 3:51 a.m. Patient 3102, a 69-year-old woman after knee replacement. Died at 4:22 a.m. from stroke. 5 patients, 5 murders, all elderly, all recovering from surgery, all during overnight hours when the recovery wing was minimally staffed, all attributed to natural complications, all performed by the same doctor. I checked the death certificates. I had access to those through the security system's integration with hospital records. Each one signed by Dr. Chambers himself, listing natural causes. Each family had accepted the explanation. Why wouldn't they? Elderly people died from surgical complications. It was tragic, but expected. No one had questioned it. No one had suspected. Except now I knew the truth, and I had video evidence of all 5 murders. The question was what to do with it. It was 5:47 a.m. My shift ended at 6 o'clock. In 13 minutes, the day shift security guard would arrive, I'd hand off the keys, and I'd go home. I could copy these files to a drive, take them with me, go to the police, or I could pretend I'd never seen them, delete my search history, copy the requested footage to the hard drive as instructed, deliver it to risk management, and forget this ever happened. That would be safer, smarter. Dr. Chambers was powerful. He had connections. Hospital administration loved him. If I accused him of murder based on security footage, they'd find a way to explain it. Medical necessity, emergency intervention. I was just a security guard. What did I know about medicine? But those were real people. Margaret Lawson, who'd probably had children, maybe grandchildren, who died thinking she'd just been unlucky. The others, too. 5 families who'd buried their loved ones believing death had been natural, unavoidable. They deserved to know the truth. I made my decision. I copied all 5 video files to a USB drive, along with the corresponding patient records and death certificates. I documented the timestamps, the patient numbers, the cause of death listings. I created a detailed log of everything I'd found. Then I copied the original requested footage to the official hard drive for risk management, making sure to include the October 8th footage of Margaret Lawson's death. Let them see it. Let them have to explain it. At 6:02 a.m., Jerry Collins arrived for the day shift. He was 23, fresh out of college, treating this job as temporary until something better came along. "Morning, Tom," he said cheerfully. "Quiet night?" I handed him the keys and the log sheet. "Yeah, real quiet." I didn't mention what I'd found, didn't mention the USB drive in my pocket. I just grabbed my jacket and left. In my car, I sat in the parking lot watching the sun rise over Riverside Medical Center. 13 years I'd worked here. 13 years of overnight shifts, of trust, of routine. And it had all been hiding this. I pulled out my phone and searched for the local police department's non-emergency number. Then I hesitated. What if they didn't believe me? What if they were in on it somehow? What if Dr. Chambers had connections in the police department? I needed someone neutral, someone with authority, but no local ties. I searched FBI field office and found one 3 hours away in the state capitol. I could drive there, walk in, hand over the evidence, let the feds handle it. But then I thought about the hospital. If Dr. Chambers realized the footage had been accessed, if risk management saw the Margaret Lawson video and started asking questions, he might destroy evidence. He might run. I needed to move fast. I called the FBI field office. A receptionist answered. "FBI, how may I direct your call?" I took a breath. "I need to report a murder, multiple murders, at a hospital. I have video evidence." There was a pause. "Please hold." A minute later, a new voice came on the line. "This is Special Agent Diane Kelleher. You're reporting multiple murders?" I explained as concisely as I could. Overnight security guard, reviewing footage, doctor injecting patients, 5 deaths. Agent Kelleher listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Where are you now?" I told her I was in the hospital parking lot. "Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. I'm sending local agents to meet you immediately. Do you have the footage with you?" I touched the USB drive in my pocket. "Yes." Agent Kelleher's voice was urgent. "Keep it safe. Don't let it out of your sight. Agents will be there within 30 minutes. She hung up. I sat in my car, waiting, watching the hospital entrance. Doctors and nurses arriving for the morning shift. Patients being wheeled in for procedures. Everything looked normal, routine. But inside that building, a serial killer was probably starting his morning rounds, checking on patients, planning his next murder. 28 minutes later, 2 black SUVs pulled into the parking lot. 4 people got out, 3 in suits, 1 in casual clothes. They approached my car. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, knocked on my window. I rolled it down. "Tom Harrington?" she asked. I nodded. She held up a badge. "Special Agent Patricia Gaines, FBI. This is Agent Michael Foster, Agent Rachel Wu, and Dr. Stephen Nichols, our medical consultant. Can we see the footage?" I handed her the USB drive. She passed it to Dr. Nichols, who pulled out a laptop from one of the SUVs. We stood in the parking lot while he loaded the files. He watched the first video, Margaret Lawson's death, in complete silence. Then the second, then the third. His expression grew progressively darker. "This is homicide," he said finally. "Clear and deliberate. The injection technique, the timing, the waiting period. He knew exactly what he was doing." Agent Gaines turned to me. "We need to take your full statement, and we need to act fast before this doctor realizes he's been discovered." We went to a nearby coffee shop. I spent 2 hours telling them everything. How I'd found the footage, what I'd observed, the patient records, the death certificates. Agent Foster took notes. Agent Wu recorded the conversation. "Doctor." Nichols asked technical questions about the hospital's camera system, the footage quality, the chain of custody. "The cameras run on a loop," I explained. "Footage older than 90 days gets automatically deleted unless it's flagged and archived. The risk management request saved these recordings. Otherwise, they'd be gone." Agent Gaines leaned forward. "Who knows you accessed this footage?" I thought about it. "No one. I was alone in the security office. The system logs my access, but my supervisor won't check those unless there's a problem." She nodded. "Good. We need you to go back to work tonight. Act normal. Don't let anyone know you've seen anything unusual. Can you do that?" My heart started pounding. "You want me to go back, while Dr. Chambers is still there?" Agent Foster spoke up. "We need time to build a case. We need to subpoena hospital records, interview witnesses, coordinate with local authorities. If Dr. Chambers suspects we're investigating, he could flee or destroy evidence. A few more days of normalcy keeps him complacent." Agent Wu added, "We'll have agents monitoring the hospital. If he makes any move to harm another patient, we'll intervene immediately." I didn't like it. Going back felt dangerous. But I also understood their logic. "Okay," I said. "I'll work my regular shifts." Agent Gaines handed me a card. "If anything unusual happens, call me immediately, day or night." I took the card, slipped it into my wallet. "What happens next?" Agent Gaines's expression was grim. "We investigate. We get warrants. We build an airtight case. And then we arrest him." That night, I returned to work at Riverside Medical Center like nothing had changed. I checked in with Jerry, took the keys, settled into the security office. But everything felt different. Every camera angle looked suspicious. Every doctor walking through the halls could be a killer. At 11:30 p.m., Dr. Chambers passed by the security desk on his way to the surgical wing. "Evening, Tom," he said with that friendly smile. "How's the family?" My mouth was dry. "Good. Kids are good." He nodded. "Glad to hear it. Quiet night?" I forced a smile. "So far." He walked on, whistling softly. I watched him on the monitors, tracking his movement through the hospital. He went to his office, checked some files, then headed to the surgical wing where a late-night emergency procedure was scheduled. Everything normal, routine. But I knew what he was capable of. I knew what those hands had done. At 2 a.m., I did my rounds, walking the halls with my flashlight, checking doors. When I passed the recovery wing, I saw 3 patients sleeping peacefully, hooked up to monitors. Any one of them could be his next target. The thought made me feel sick. Over the next 3 days, I worked my shifts and watched the cameras obsessively. Agent Gaines called me twice daily for updates. "Has Dr. Chambers done anything unusual?" she'd ask. The answer was always no. He performed surgeries, made his rounds, went home. A model doctor. On the 4th day, Agent Gaines called with news. "We've obtained warrants for Dr. Chambers' home, office, and hospital locker. We've also subpoenaed his financial records and phone logs. We're coordinating with the medical examiner's office to exhume the bodies of the 5 victims for autopsy." I felt a chill. "Exhume the bodies?" she confirmed. "We need to identify what he injected. The video shows clear evidence of foul play, but we need toxicology results to prove cause of death. The families have been notified. They're cooperating." "What about the hospital?" I asked. "Do they know?" Agent Gaines paused. "Not yet. We're keeping the investigation confidential until we make the arrest. But Tom, there's something you need to know. We've been reviewing Dr. Chambers' history. He's been at Riverside Medical Center for 12 years. Before that, he worked at 3 other hospitals in different states. We're requesting records from those facilities to see if there are similar unexplained deaths." The implications hit me. "You think he's been doing this for years?" Her voice was grave. "We think he might be one of the most prolific medical serial killers in U.S. history." I felt dizzy. All those years, all those patients. How many had he killed? And I'd been working here the entire time, watching the cameras, trusting him, never suspecting. On the 5th day, the medical examiner completed the autopsies. Agent Gaines called me at home. I was sleeping after my overnight shift, with the results. All 5 victims had lethal doses of potassium chloride in their systems. It causes cardiac arrest, looks natural, and is nearly impossible to detect after death unless you're specifically looking for it. Dr. Chambers used the same method for all 5 murders. Potassium chloride. I'd heard of it. Hospitals used it medically, but in controlled doses. Too much, and it stopped the heart instantly. "So you have him?" I asked. Agent Gaines's voice was tight. "We have evidence, but we need more. We've analyzed his financial records. Large cash withdrawals every month, no clear explanation. We've traced his phone records, calls to unlisted numbers, burner phones, and we've found something else. Life insurance policies. My blood ran cold. What? She explained. 3 of the 5 victims had recently purchased life insurance policies, all from the same company, all with Dr. Chambers listed as a secondary beneficiary in a medical trust arrangement. It's a scheme we've seen before. Convince elderly patients to set up medical trusts to cover end-of-life care, list yourself as beneficiary, then hasten their death. I felt rage building. He was profiting from this? Agent Gaines confirmed. Each policy paid out between $150,000 and $300,000. He's collected nearly $800,000 over the past 6 months. This wasn't just about killing. It was about money. Greed. Dr. Chambers had murdered 5 people for insurance payouts, and he'd done it in a hospital where he was trusted, respected, protected. When are you arresting him? I demanded. Agent Gaines hesitated. There's a complication. We've shared our evidence with the local district attorney's office. They're concerned about chain of custody on the video footage. They want to make sure the evidence is admissible in court. I gripped the phone tighter. What does that mean? She sighed. It means they're questioning whether you had proper authorization to access archived footage, whether the hospital's privacy policies were violated, whether the evidence could be thrown out on a technicality. I felt my stomach drop. You're saying he might get away with this because I watched the wrong video? Agent Gaines's voice was firm. No, I'm saying we need to build an ironclad case. We're working with the hospital's legal team now, getting formal authorization for the footage, establishing proper chain of custody. It's taking time, but we'll get there. Time. Meanwhile, Dr. Chambers was still working, still seeing patients, still having access to people he could kill. How long? I asked. A week, maybe 2. We're close, Tom. Just hold on. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. 2 weeks. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal while a serial killer walked free. That night, I went to work as usual. But at 1:15 a.m., something changed. I was monitoring camera 8B, the same camera that had captured Margaret Lawson's murder, when I saw Dr. Chambers enter the recovery wing. He wasn't scheduled to be there. No surgeries were listed for the overnight shift. He was just walking in, checking rooms, looking at patients. My heart started racing. I switched between cameras, tracking his movement. He stopped outside room 804. Inside, an elderly man was recovering from surgery performed earlier that day. Patient 5234, Harold Green, age 71, gallbladder removal. Dr. Chambers checked the hallway. No nurses in sight. He reached into his coat pocket. I grabbed my phone, called Agent Gaines. It rang 4 times before she answered, voice thick with sleep. Tom, what's wrong? My words came out in a rush. He's here, Dr. Chambers. He's in the recovery wing. I think he's about to kill someone. She was instantly alert. Which room? I told her. We're 15 minutes away. Keep watching. If he makes a move, intervene. Stop him. She hung up. I watched the monitor. Dr. Chambers pulled out a syringe, the same size and shape as the ones in the archived footage. My hands were shaking. What could I do? I was a security guard. He was a surgeon. But I couldn't just sit here and watch another murder. I grabbed my radio, called the charge nurse on duty. This is security. We have a situation in the recovery wing. Room 804. Need immediate assistance. I left the security office, running through the halls. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I reached the recovery wing just as Dr. Chambers was inserting the syringe into Harold Green's IV line. Stop! I shouted. Dr. Chambers froze, the syringe halfway depressed. He turned to look at me, and his expression was calm. Too calm. Tom, he said pleasantly. What are you doing here? I stepped into the room, my hand on my radio. Step away from the patient. Dr. Chambers smiled. I'm administering medication, standard post-operative care. I shook my head. That's not medication. That's potassium chloride. You're trying to kill him. For the first time, Dr. Chambers' expression shifted. The friendly mask slipped, revealing something cold underneath. You don't know what you're talking about. The charge nurse arrived, out of breath. What's going on? I pointed at Dr. Chambers. He's trying to harm the patient. Call the police. The nurse looked confused, looking between me and the doctor. Doctor. Chambers pulled the syringe out of the IV line, held it up. Tom has made a serious mistake. I was administering pain medication, and he's somehow gotten the idea that I'm doing something harmful. This is a medical emergency situation, and I'm treating my patient. His voice was authoritative, commanding, the kind of voice that had convinced families to trust him with their loved ones for 12 years. The nurse hesitated. Dr. Chambers, is everything all right? He nodded. Everything's fine. But I'm concerned about Tom's mental state. Perhaps he should take the rest of the night off. I felt panic rising. He was turning this around, making me look unstable. I've seen the footage, I said. 5 patients, 5 murders. Margaret Lawson, Harold Fleming, Dorothy Knox, Robert Carlyle, Patricia Young. You killed them all. And you're trying to kill Harold Green right now. Doctor, Chambers's eyes narrowed. Those are serious accusations, Tom. Slanderous, actually. I think you need to leave before you say something you'll regret. The nurse was looking at me with concern now, like I'd lost my mind. And maybe I had. Maybe I should have waited for the FBI. But I'd seen that syringe, seen him about to inject it, and I'd reacted. Sirens wailed outside. Agent Gaines and her team burst through the recovery wing doors 30 seconds later, guns drawn. FBI, Dr. Elliot Chambers, step away from the patient and put your hands where we can see them. Dr. Chambers' face went white. He dropped the syringe. It clattered to the floor, the contents spilling across the tile. Agent Foster moved quickly, placing the doctor in handcuffs while Agent Wu collected the syringe as evidence. Dr. Nichols went immediately to Harold Green, checking his vitals. He's stable, doctor, Nichols announced. Syringe was only partially depressed. Minimal dosage entered his system. He'll be fine. Agent Gaines approached Dr. Chambers. Elliot Chambers, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Harold Green and the murders of Margaret Lawson, Harold Fleming, Dorothy Knox, Robert Carlyle, and Patricia Young. You have the right to remain silent. She read him his rights while he stood there in handcuffs, his expression blank. The friendly doctor was gone. What remained was something hollow and cold. The charge nurse stared in shock. Dr. Chambers, this can't be real. Agent Wu turned to her. We'll need your statement, and we need to secure this room as a crime scene. Within an hour, the entire hospital was in chaos. Police cars and FBI vehicles filled the parking lot. Administrators were being woken up and brought in. Reporters had somehow gotten wind of the story and were gathering at the gates. I stood in the hallway, giving my statement to Agent Foster for what felt like the 100th time. Hospital security footage was being seized as evidence. Dr. Chambers' office was being searched. His locker was being emptied. Everything was being cataloged, photographed, documented. The chief operating officer of Riverside Medical Center, a stern woman named Laura Finley, approached me around 3 a.m. Mr. Harrington, I need to understand what happened here. I explained about finding the footage, contacting the FBI, tonight's intervention. She listened with growing horror. You're saying Dr. Chambers has been murdering patients for months? Right here in our hospital? I nodded. At least 5, maybe more. She looked like she might be sick. This is catastrophic. For the families, for the hospital, for everyone. She paused. Why didn't you come to hospital administration first? The question stung. Would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd told you the chief of surgery was a serial killer based on security footage, would you have taken my word over his? Laura Finley had no answer. Because we both knew the truth. The hospital would have protected Dr. Chambers. They would have questioned my judgment, reviewed my employment history, found a way to discredit me. Going to the FB, I had been the only way to ensure the truth came out. The arrest made national news by morning. Prominent surgeon arrested for multiple murders, read the headlines. Dr. Chambers' photo was everywhere. The distinguished chief of surgery, the respected medical professional, now in handcuffs facing serial murder charges. The FBI's investigation expanded rapidly. Records from Dr. Chambers' previous hospitals revealed 17 additional suspicious deaths over 15 years. Elderly patients, all post-surgical, all attributed to natural complications. Agents were working with medical examiners across multiple states to investigate each case. The death toll kept climbing. By the end of the week, Dr. Chambers was connected to 32 murders, 32 people who'd trusted him with their lives, who died because a doctor had decided their deaths were profitable. The families of his victims were devastated. I watched the news coverage, saw Margaret Lawson's daughter sobbing at a press conference. My mother trusted him. We all trusted him. He told us she'd died peacefully, that there was nothing anyone could have done, and he was the one who killed her. The grief was compounded by betrayal. These families had mourned natural deaths, had processed their loss as tragic but inevitable. Now they had to grieve all over again, knowing their loved ones had been murdered. The lawsuits came quickly. Families suing the hospital for negligence, for failing to oversee Dr. Chambers, for allowing a serial killer to operate unchecked for years. Riverside Medical Center's reputation was destroyed overnight. Patient admissions dropped. Donors pulled funding. The board of directors launched an internal investigation. I was placed on administrative leave, standard procedure during a major investigation. I spent my days being interviewed by FBI agents, lawyers, journalists. Everyone wanted to know how I'd discovered the truth, why I'd kept watching the footage, what had made me suspicious. I told the story over and over until it stopped feeling real, until it became just words I was reciting. 3 weeks after Dr. Chambers' arrest, the district attorney held a press conference. DA Christopher Nolan, a silver-haired man with 30 years of prosecutorial experience, stood before a bank of cameras and microphones. Today, we are charging Dr. Elliot Chambers with 32 counts of first-degree murder, 17 counts of insurance fraud, and 8 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence against him is overwhelming and irrefutable. We will seek the maximum penalty under law. Reporters shouted questions. Do you expect him to plead guilty? DA Nolan shook his head. Dr. Chambers maintains his innocence. He claims the deaths were all natural, that the security footage has been misinterpreted, that this is a witch hunt. We expect this case to go to trial. The trial was set for 8 months later. In the meantime, I tried to return to normal life. But normal didn't exist anymore. I couldn't go back to work at Riverside Medical Center. The place felt contaminated now, tainted by what had happened there. I couldn't even drive past it without feeling sick. The hospital offered me a settlement, $75,000 and a confidentiality agreement. They wanted me to stay quiet, to not discuss the internal failures that had allowed Dr. Chambers to kill for so long. I refused. The families deserved to know the truth, all of it. Instead, I testified at wrongful death hearings, explained how the hospital's overnight protocols were lax, how minimal staffing created opportunities for Dr. Chambers to act without oversight, how the culture of deference to senior physicians meant no one questioned his actions. The lawsuits resulted in a $340 million settlement paid out to victims' families. Riverside Medical Center nearly went bankrupt. The board of directors was replaced. New safety protocols were implemented across the entire hospital system. None of it brought back the people Dr. Chambers had killed, but it was something. Accountability. Change. The trial began in June. I was called as the prosecution's first witness. I walked into the courtroom and saw Dr. Chambers sitting at the defense table in a suit, looking thinner and older than I remembered. His attorneys were aggressive, experienced, expensive. They immediately challenged the admissibility of the security footage. Your Honor, lead defense attorney Gregory Saunders argued, the footage was obtained without proper authorization. Mr. Harrington exceeded his authority as a security guard by accessing archived files he had no business viewing. This is a clear violation of the hospital's privacy policies and potentially illegal under state wiretapping laws. The prosecutor, Assistant D.A. Rebecca Montgomery, countered. The footage was obtained in the course of Mr. Harrington's regular duties. He was authorized to access the security system and did so while fulfilling a legitimate request from risk management. What he discovered was evidence of multiple crimes, which he appropriately reported to federal authorities. The footage is absolutely admissible. Judge Thomas Brennan, a no-nonsense jurist with 40 years on the bench, reviewed the arguments and ruled in favor of the prosecution. The footage is admissible. Continue, Ms. Montgomery. I spent 2 days on the witness stand. The prosecution walked me through everything, finding the footage, analyzing the patterns, contacting the FBI, the night I'd intervened to save Harold Green. The defense tried to paint me as an overzealous security guard who'd misinterpreted medical procedures, who'd had a vendetta against Dr. Chambers for some imagined slight. Gregory Saunders grilled me for hours. Isn't it true, Mr. Harrington, that you have no medical training whatsoever? I agreed I didn't. So you can't actually know whether what Dr. Chambers was doing was harmful or therapeutic, can you? I looked him in the eye. I know what murder looks like, and I watched him commit it 5 times. The jury seemed to appreciate my directness. After me came the medical experts. Dr. Stephen Nichols, the FBI's medical consultant, explained how potassium chloride worked, how it caused cardiac arrest, how it would appear as natural death without specific toxicology screening. The medical examiner who'd performed the autopsies testified about finding lethal levels of potassium chloride in all 5 exhumed victims. A forensic accountant detailed the insurance fraud scheme, showed how Dr. Chambers had collected nearly $900,000 from policies where he'd been listed as beneficiary. FBI agents testified about the evidence found in Dr. Chambers' home, files on all his victims, records of insurance policies, notes about optimal dosing for potassium chloride. It was damning, overwhelming, irrefutable. The defense's strategy was to claim that Dr. Chambers had been administering legitimate emergency medical treatment, that the deaths had been unfortunate but natural, that the insurance beneficiary designations were coincidental and part of standard medical trust arrangements. But Harold Green, the patient I'd saved, testified that he'd never consented to any medical trust, had never been asked to list Dr. Chambers as a beneficiary on anything. The families of the victims testified, their grief raw and devastating. Margaret Lawson's daughter described her mother as vibrant and healthy before the surgery, how the sudden death had shocked everyone. The doctor told us it was just one of those things, that sometimes people don't recover well from anesthesia. We believed him. We trusted him. And he'd murdered her. One by one, they told similar stories. Loved ones who'd been healthy, whose deaths had been unexpected, whose families had accepted the explanations from a trusted doctor. Dr. Chambers sat through it all expressionless, showing no remorse, no emotion. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. In the case of People v. Elliot Chambers, on the count of murder in the first degree of Margaret Lawson, we find the defendant guilty. 32 times. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Dr. Chambers was convicted on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Brennan showed no mercy. Dr. Elliot Chambers, you used your position of trust, your medical expertise, and your access to vulnerable patients to commit horrific crimes for financial gain. You betrayed every oath you took as a physician. You destroyed families. You undermined public trust in the medical profession. The court sentences you to 32 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Dr. Chambers was led away in handcuffs. He'd spend the rest of his life in prison. He'd never practice medicine again. He'd never hurt anyone again. Outside the courthouse, I was surrounded by reporters. How does it feel to know you stopped a serial killer? One asked. I thought about it. It doesn't feel like anything, I said honestly. 32 people are dead. I didn't stop him in time to save them. I just caught him before he killed more. But Margaret Lawson's daughter found me in the crowd. Thank you, she said, gripping my hands. Thank you for giving us the truth. Thank you for making sure he paid for what he did. That meant something. 6 months after the trial, I started a new job. Not security. I couldn't go back to that. Instead, I worked with a nonprofit that advocated for patient safety, helping hospitals implement better oversight protocols to prevent medical serial killers from operating unchecked. I spoke at conferences, shared my story, pushed for reform. The work felt meaningful in a way my security job never had. My family adjusted. My kids understood why I'd done what I'd done, why I'd risked my career and safety to expose the truth. My wife was proud of me, though she wished I'd never had to be in that position. We all wished that. 1 year after finding the footage, I drove past Riverside Medical Center for the first time since quitting. The building looked the same brick facade, same emergency entrance, same parking lot where I'd met the FBI agents. But I knew what had happened inside those walls. The lives lost, the trust betrayed, the evil that had hidden behind a friendly smile and a white coat. I didn't stop, didn't even slow down. That chapter of my life was over. I'd been an overnight security guard for 13 years, and in the end, those 13 years of routine, boring, unremarkable work had led to one moment that mattered. One choice to look closely instead of looking away. One decision to pursue the truth no matter the cost. Dr. Elliot Chambers killed 32 people, but he wanted to kill more. And he would have, if I'd just copied the files without watching them. If I'd followed protocol and minded my own business. If I'd been too afraid to question a respected surgeon. I'd spent 13 years watching cameras, seeing everything and nothing. But that one night, I'd actually seen. And I'd refused to look away. That's what I told myself when the nightmares came. When I woke up at 3:18 a.m., remembering Margaret Lawson's monitor flatlining. When I questioned whether I could have acted sooner, saved more people, done things differently. I'd seen the truth, and I'd made sure the world saw it too. Sometimes that's all you can do. Watch closely, trust your instincts, and when you see something wrong, refuse to pretend it's right, even if it costs you everything, even if no one believes you, even if it shatters everything you thought you knew. You watch, you document, you act, because somewhere, someone is counting on you to see them, to save them, to care enough to do something. 32 people died before I found that footage, but Harold Green lived, and every patient who would have been Dr. Chambers' future victim lived. The mothers and fathers and grandparents who would have died in that recovery wing, their families told it was just bad luck, just complications, just one of those things. They lived. Because one night, a security guard decided to actually watch the footage instead of just copying it, because I cared enough to look closely. Because when I saw murder happening on my monitors, I refused to call it something else. I walked out of Riverside Medical Center permanently after 13 years. But I didn't walk away from the truth. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not the job, not the routine, not the comfortable illusion that everything was fine. The truth. Even when it was terrible. Even when it destroyed everything. Especially then. Because that's when truth matters most. If you made it this far, hit like. You've earned it.